Hi, I'm George Connor from ConnorGolf.com with you again this year with the CSGA golf tips. This month we're talking about some things that you could do in these last few weeks of winter before the courses start opening. And the first thing that I listed was working every day just for a few minutes on your posture, your setup, and your ball position. And I wanted to go through that with you. I see bad posture or incorrect posture really as being a problem with almost every student that I see, not everybody, but almost. And the common thing that I see is, the first thing I see is a real rounded upper back, especially in men. And this would be a pretty typical posture. And why we don't want to do this is, the more I'm rounded in my upper body, the less rotation I have. So for every 1 degree of bend I put in the middle part of my spine, I'm going to lose 2 degrees of rotation. So you see somebody standing like this, and the guy will say, well, I'm not hitting it very far and I don't feel like I can turn very well. So the first thing we want to do in this case would be to take your pelvis, and instead of your pelvis sitting straight up and down so your belt would be horizontal to the ground, we want to tilt it forward. And the image I use with a lot of golfers is, if you imagine that the belt was the top of a bucket that's full of water, you don't want to hold the water in the bucket. You want to tip it over so water would be spilling out in front. Once I tilt my pelvis forward, my lower back is bent forward, and now instead of having to slouch my shoulders and round out my back to reach the ground, I'm going to substitute this mechanism to get to the ground with the pelvis, and now I can get here. Okay, so we should see a pretty straight spine all the way up to about where the tag of your shirt would be. And a couple other benchmarks that I like to see is that the middle of your shoulders would be about at the balls of your feet, and then your hands would be about underneath your chin. Okay? The question I get a lot more from a beginner or somebody going through a change is, I feel like I'm standing too close to the ball or I'm too far from the ball. And to me, if your hands are more underneath your stomach, we're going to be crowding the ball, we're going to be too close. If we're out here like this and the hands are more underneath your forehead, well, that would be too far. So that's a good way to do it. The last thing I want to talk to you about was ball position. Ball position and alignment really go hand in hand. The ball doesn't know what line your heels are on or your shoulders are on or anything else. The ball's going to react to where the club's moving as it goes through it. So what we tend to forget is, if I'm aimed right down this stick and I have the ball in the proper position, say right in the middle of my stance for a short iron, if all of a sudden, without realizing, that ball were to creep back, okay, all my alignments are going to stay the same, but where I'm actually aimed is going to be out to the right, because as my golf club comes from the inside of the target line and onto the ball, if the ball's further down the target line, further away from the target, that club is still going to be traveling further to the right when it hits the ball. The club face is going to tend to have not rotated as much by the time it gets to the ball. So the further back in the stance I'm going to put the ball, the more right I'm actually aimed. And likewise, if I get the ball too far forward, that's going to be where I'm, without realizing it, everything's going to be aimed left of where my body lines are going. So take a couple minutes every day in the house, get into good posture, having a mirror to look back at and see that you're straighter in the upper back instead of rounded. You have some tilt from your pelvis. Your shoulders are over the balls of your feet. Your hands are underneath your chin. And if you're indoors and you're not wearing long pants, you should always be able to see all of your shoelaces. One of the reasons that I see pelvis is getting too vertical would be that we bend our knees too much. If you bend your knees too much, your kneecaps are actually going to block the vision of your shoes, of your shoelaces anyway. So you should be able to see all your shoelaces. Belt buckle's lower than the loop behind you. Back is nice and straight, and then you can work on your alignments from there. Make sure you're doing that at home a couple minutes every day.